Being persuasive is actually quite easy, but it's a skill. And like anything else, you need to learn how to use it. So think about persuasive writing as being a bit like a Swiss Army knife. There are different tools, so you need to learn how each one works. Luckily for this, there are just 3 to remember. We'll start with emotional. An emotional argument, it's a bit like a guilt trip. It's where you appeal to someone's beliefs and how they feel about something. For instance, you might say, how would you feel if tigers became extinct? You're making them feel something as part of your argument. Next is the authoritative argument. It's telling somebody they can trust what you're saying because you're an expert. For instance, I have a PhD in this area. Or you can have authority because you have personal experience of something, and that's informed your view on that topic. For example, if the question was about being at school, you could say, well, I'm a student myself, I should know. Lastly, there's a logical argument. It's where you appeal to someone's rational, logical side with facts and figures. It's thought this theory was developed by the Greek philosopher Aristotle back in the 4th century BC. He said, persuasion is clearly a sort of demonstration, since we are most fully persuaded when we consider a thing to have been demonstrated. So this is still applicable today, and in order to persuade your examiner, you need to demonstrate your point of view. Just like you would in maths or science, you need to demonstrate through a methodology. And if you know your ancient Greek, you're going to know that the Greek terms for these are pathos for emotional, ethos for authoritative, and logos for logical. We're going to look at some examples now on how each of these work in practice, but just be aware these are completely made up, the facts aren't real, and I've exaggerated them for effect. So let's look at the first one. Without your support, these pandas have little hope of survival. Would you like to ensure these majestic creatures survive for your children and grandchildren to see? If so, please give £50 today. It's not too late to help save pandas from extinction. So here we can see the language is very, very emotive. Majestic creatures, that invokes quite a powerful image, and it implies something superior, something that we need to look after, makes us directly feel responsible. Also, this use of the second person to directly address these rhetorical questions at us makes it very personal again. It makes us think, it makes us feel, which is the whole intention of this form of persuasion. Next, we have authoritative. The Royal Society of Panda Preservation urges you to act fast. The RSPP has recorded a sharp decline in numbers over recent years and believes the species could die out within a generation. The RSPP asks for just £50 to help fund its important work to help conserve the world's pandas. Now, the whole basis of this argument here is the PSPP, they know what they're talking about. You can trust what they're saying because they're the experts and they should be believed. Notice there's no figures here to back up their argument because they don't really need to. They're the RSPP, they're the authority. We can believe everything they say. Now this is the logical, rational argument. Recent figures show the panda population has declined by 90% in the last 15 years. It is forecasted that there will be fewer than 100 living pandas in the wild by 2025. This is a very effective argument because facts just don't lie. They're cold, hard figures here, they speak for themselves. But if this is going to be truly convincing, you'll obviously want to know who provided these figures and can you trust for them. And that's why it's good to blend the techniques together. So either you'll have a mix of authority and logic, in which case you'd say the RSPP report a 90% decline, so you answer the who provided that statistic, or you'd mix emotional and logic, so you might say something like, there'll be fewer than 100 pandas in 10 years. What will you tell your grandchildren then? But even better to blend all 3. And if in your exam, make sure you do mix all 3. Because a purely emotional argument, that's just going to be quite sentimental, a bit hollow. If it's purely authoritative, then that's going to seem a little bit arrogant, or even worse, just a bit too subjective. And if it's logical and it's just packed full of facts and figures, I mean, that's just going to be a bit dull. So try to just mix it all up. The top tip here as well is to adjust your argument for your audience. So if you think about it like a ratio, depending on who you're writing to or the speech is directed to, adjust it. So for instance, if you're told to write to a family member, you might want to lean a little bit more on the emotional argument. But whoever it is, just make sure that you demonstrate your argument by keeping in mind what technique they're going to be most persuaded by. In other words, make sure you pick the right tool for the task.